King Charles and Kate Middleton can't believe Prince William took a secret trip abroad to meet up with his side chick. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. Before the first whispers of scandal, before the tension that would ripple through Buckingham Palace, there was an image carefully constructed over decades. Prince William is the dutiful heir, the perfect balance of charm, composure, and responsibility. To the public, he was everything a prince should be. Handsome, articulate, seemingly fearless in the face of scrutiny, and utterly devoted to his family. Behind the polished appearances, however, was a man constantly navigating the pressures of a life few could imagine. From childhood, William had been groomed for a role that demanded perfection, an existence in which every word, every gesture, every decision was magnified under the relentless lens of public and media attention. The world watched not merely to observe, but to judge, to compare, to demand flawless adherence to the unspoken codes of royalty. The early mornings of royal life, often hidden from public view, were a study in discipline. William's day would begin with briefings, security updates, and charitable correspondence, each task a building block in the foundation of his public persona. Official photographs showed a smiling prince, eyes clear and confident, standing beside his wife, Kate Middleton, or shaking hands with dignitaries around the globe. Yet the private moments revealed a different story. Advisors who worked closely with him noted that even in these controlled environments, there was a restlessness beneath the surface, a tension born of the impossibility of separating the man from the role. For William, the line between personal desire and duty was often blurred, a constant balancing act between what he wanted and what he was expected to uphold. Kate Middleton, equally admired for her poise and intelligence, complemented William's public image with a grace that made their union appear seamless. Together they embodied a modern monarchy, youthful yet responsible, relatable yet aspirational. Their marriage had, in the eyes of the world, weathered early scrutiny and evolved into a partnership admired for its apparent stability. Yet, even in the most secure unions, pressures build quietly, imperceptibly, until cracks begin to appear. Friends and insiders would later note that beneath the smiles and formal gestures, subtle tensions simmered. The public rarely sees the private negotiations of marriage under scrutiny, the quiet discussions over appearances, expectations, and obligations that occupy the majority of a royal couple's daily life. Life at Kensington Palace was structured, ritualized, and meticulously planned. Each public appearance was rehearsed, each engagement carefully timed. The couple's calendar was a living document, shifting minute by minute to accommodate royal duties, media opportunities, and private matters. But even in the most regimented schedules, there were gaps, small spaces where personal choices could creep in unnoticed. It was in these moments and in scheduled flight, a late-night meeting, a private dinner, that opportunities arose for actions that might never align with the polished public image. And it was precisely in one of these rare windows of personal freedom that the events that would shake the royal household began to unfold. Friends and aides would later recall that William had become increasingly restless over recent months. While outwardly committed to his duties, there were subtle signs of dissatisfaction, moments when his attention drifted, when he seemed preoccupied or distracted. The pressures of public life, coupled with the expectations of an heir apparent, weighed heavily on him. For decades, the monarchy had demanded that William embody not only the historical and cultural legacy of his family, but also the ideal of moral propriety, a figure whose every action reinforced the stability of the institution. The tension between personal desires and institutional obligations created an undercurrent of anxiety, a silent struggle that few could perceive, but that would eventually manifest in actions that defied both expectation and protocol. Amid this backdrop, the palace operated with a careful choreography designed to anticipate and mitigate disruptions. Security teams, aides, and advisors were trained to respond swiftly to emergencies, whether logistical, diplomatic, or personal. Yet, despite the layers of oversight, human impulses cannot be entirely predicted. Even in a life so controlled, there exists a tension between control and spontaneity, between obligation and desire. It is precisely in these moments when the pressures of duty collide with personal longing that choices are made, choices that carry consequences not just for the individual, but for every person connected to them, and for Prince William, one such choice would soon emerge, invisible to the world at first, but seismic in its impact. The calm that characterized this period was in retrospect deceptive. There was laughter at official events, shared glances between William and Kate that suggested intimacy and understanding, and appearances that reinforced the image of a solid partnership. Yet beneath this veneer, subtle indicators suggested that all was not as serene as it appeared. A late call here, a hurried exit there, the occasional unexplained absence. These small deviations went largely unnoticed by the public, but did not escape the scrutiny of the palace staff. Advisors who had worked closely with William noted a shift, a quiet tension that suggested the prince was contemplating actions that might challenge the careful equilibrium of his life. In hindsight, these were the early tremors of a storm that would erupt with full force in the weeks to come. While the royal family's public image remained impeccable, personal dynamics were far more complex. William, despite his composed exterior, was a man navigating emotions that few could fully understand. Desire, curiosity, and the allure of secrecy can be powerful forces, particularly when combined with the pressures of visibility and expectation. The prince's upbringing, marked by privilege but also intense scrutiny, had instilled in him both a sense of duty and an understanding of how easily public perception could be manipulated. Yet, even with this awareness, the temptation to pursue personal fulfillment, however fleeting or risky, proved irresistible. It is within this tension between the public persona and private longing that the story of the secret trip abroad takes root. Kate, for her part, remained outwardly devoted and supportive, yet the pressures of royal life weighed heavily on her as well. As the mother of young children and a public figure in her own right, she was constantly navigating expectations of composure, empathy, and resilience. Friends would later describe her as perceptive and attuned to subtle shifts in William's behavior, noticing patterns that might have gone unnoticed by others. The signs of restlessness, the occasional unexplained absences, and the subtle changes in demeanor all suggested that something significant was brewing, though no one could have predicted the exact nature or magnitude of what was to come. In the final weeks before the trip, William's behavior, though outwardly consistent with his public role, revealed glimpses of internal conflict. Advisors noted moments of hesitation, decisions that seemed uncharacteristically impulsive, and an intensity in private interactions that suggested preoccupation with matters beyond the palace walls. These signs, though subtle, would later be recognized as precursors to the actions that ultimately set off a chain of events, exposing secrets that had long remained hidden and challenging equilibrium of one of the most visible families in the world. And so, in this calm before the storm, the stage was set. The outwardly perfect world of royal duty, public appearances, and carefully curated family life masked a growing tension, a quiet undercurrent of desire, secrecy, and impending revelation. It was a world in which every choice carried immense weight, every deviation had consequences, and every hidden action could erupt into public spectacle. In this delicate balance, one decision would soon tip the scales, shattering illusions, testing loyalties, and igniting a drama that would captivate both the palace and the world beyond. The first sign that something was amiss came not with a dramatic announcement or a public scandal, but with absence. Prince William, who had been meticulously consistent in his appearances and duties, suddenly began to vanish from events without clear explanation. Initially, it was small deviations, a charity gala attended by Kate without him, a planned engagement delayed at the last minute, a sudden press release explaining that work commitments had shifted. To the casual observer, these might have seemed inconsequential, mere logistical adjustments in a busy royal calendar. Yet within the palace, these absences triggered a cascade of concern and quiet speculation. Staff whispered in corridors, aides exchanged cautious glances, and even the seasoned security teams noted an unfamiliar tension in the prince's movements. The sudden disappearance was marked not only by physical absence, but by the eerie secrecy surrounding it. Flights were booked with minimal disclosure, and communications were carefully controlled, leaving even close aides uncertain of the prince's exact itinerary. Observers later noted a heightened security presence, unusual logistical arrangements, and rapid approvals for last-minute travel. It was a stark departure from the routine predictability of royal scheduling, a pattern meticulously maintained for years. In retrospect, these small anomalies were the first visible tremors of a storm that would shake the royal family to its core. For Kate Middleton, the absence was alarming on multiple levels. Beyond the obvious public and familial concerns, there was the personal dimension, the growing realization that her husband's behavior was no longer entirely transparent. Friends close to the Duchess later described a period of quiet anxiety during which she attempted to reconcile the demands of public life with the subtle signs of potential secrecy at home. How could William, the man she had trusted implicitly, suddenly become so elusive? How could he step into the shadows in a life otherwise dictated by structure and visibility? The questions were relentless, circling her mind like a storm cloud threatening to burst. For Kate, the discomfort was not merely professional or reputational. It was deeply personal, an emotional breach that struck at the foundation of trust and intimacy within their marriage. Meanwhile, King Charles observed the situation with the dual lens of father and monarch. He understood better than most the pressures of royal scrutiny and the complexities of personal desire intertwined with public expectation. Yet even with decades of experience, the unfolding circumstances tested his patience and judgment. As a father, he was concerned about the choices of his son, the heir to the throne, and the potential repercussions of actions that could not be contained within private confines. As king, the implications were far-reaching. Any misstep by William could ripple through public perception, media narrative, and even political interpretation. The delicate equilibrium of monarchy, already vulnerable to media magnification, faced a sudden, unexpected threat, demanding a measured response that balanced discretion, authority, and emotional reality. The palace staff, while trained to handle extraordinary situations, quickly recognized the unusual nature of William's movements. Security advisors and aides were placed on high alert, tasked with monitoring travel, verifying locations, and ensuring that confidentiality remained intact. Communications protocols were tightened, rumors within the staff network were monitored, and every interaction was scrutinized for potential breaches of security or protocol. The sudden disappearance, seemingly simple on the surface, carried profound implications for both the logistics and optics of royal life. A single misstep could result in exposure, and exposure in the world of royalty meant more than embarrassment. It meant public judgment, media frenzy, and familial strain. While the palace moved to contain the internal disruption, the external environment began to shift as well. Observers noted gaps in William's public presence, inconsistencies in reporting schedules, and rumors circulating among journalists and social commentators. Social media, often a magnifying glass for royal activity, began to speculate, piecing together fragmented sightings, unexplained travel posts, and vague eyewitness accounts. Though unverified, these fragments created a narrative that fed curiosity and tension. The prince, it seemed, was somewhere secret, engaged in activities that remained deliberately hidden from the public eye. For the monarchy, the sudden disappearance was a double-edged sword. It protected immediate privacy, but simultaneously sowed the seeds of speculation that could spiral uncontrollably. As days stretched into a week, the tension intensified. Kate's routine public appearances were shadowed by concern and internal questioning. Even well-wishers and close friends could detect the subtle undercurrents of anxiety and uncertainty. William's pattern of secrecy, carefully maintained, began to weigh on her emotionally. The absence of clarity created an invisible space filled with doubt, speculation, and emotional strain. Friends later recounted that Kate sought counsel discreetly, confiding in close aides about her unease while maintaining the appearance of calm and composure before the public. Her ability to navigate these dual realities, the personal and the public, highlighted the immense pressures of royal life, where private turmoil must coexist with the expectation of flawless demeanor within the palace. The unfolding mystery prompted a series of discreet inquiries. Aides and advisors attempted to verify the prince's movements, reaching out to contacts abroad, coordinating with international security teams, and cross-referencing flight and accommodation records. The complexity of such investigations underscored the unusual nature of the situation. William's behavior was not merely a minor deviation from routine, but a significant anomaly that required careful monitoring and intervention. Even within the confines of royal oversight, there was recognition that the prince's autonomy in this instance had introduced variables beyond the usual scope of palace control. Speculation about the reason for William's disappearance began to intensify. Observers both inside and outside the palace wondered whether the absence was related to work, personal matters, or something more clandestine. Rumors emerged of secret meetings, private trips, and mysterious locations, each adding layers of intrigue to an already tense situation. The uncertainty created a fertile ground for imagination and analysis. What could justify such deliberate secrecy? What forces were compelling the heir to step outside the carefully maintained boundaries of royal life? And most importantly, who might be involved in these hidden activities? The tension reached a critical juncture when subtle leaks began to surface in the press. Anonymous sources hinted at irregular travel patterns, late-night departures, and meetings that did not align with public schedules. Though these reports were often vague, they amplified existing speculation, creating a feedback loop in which palace anxiety and media curiosity fueled each other. For Kate and Charles, the leaks were a source of frustration and concern. They demonstrated the difficulty of maintaining confidentiality in an era of instantaneous communication and global scrutiny. Even minor deviations could be magnified into stories with international reach, forcing the palace to weigh every response carefully, balancing transparency, discretion, and the protection of family integrity. Amid this swirling uncertainty, William himself navigated his secretive journey with a mixture of resolve and apprehension. Sources suggest that he was acutely aware of the risks, emotional, reputational, and institutional, that accompanied his actions. Yet, the choice to proceed, despite the stakes, reflected a complex interplay of personal desire, emotional fulfillment, and the allure of the forbidden. The journey, though shrouded in secrecy, carried profound implications. Every decision, every encounter, every hidden movement introduced the potential for exposure that could reverberate far beyond the immediate context. For the prince, this was not merely a private adventure. It was a high-stakes gamble, one whose consequences would test both personal and familial resilience. By the time the disappearance was widely noticed within palace circles, the situation had evolved from a minor anomaly to a crisis of confidence and trust. Advisors recognized that what had begun as a single deviation from routine had grown into a pattern that could not be ignored. Internal discussions shifted from speculation to active management, coordinating with security, assessing potential public fallout, and preparing for the eventuality that the hidden journey might become known. The sudden disappearance, while initially subtle, had created a ripple effect that threatened not only the immediate calm of the household, but also the long-term stability of relationships, reputations, and the monarchy itself. The emotional consequences for Kate and Charles were profound. Kate, confronting the reality of William's secrecy, faced a tension between public composure and private anguish. Charles, navigating the dual responsibilities of father and king, grappled with how to respond to a situation that straddled personal betrayal and institutional risk. Both were acutely aware that the unfolding events could not be contained indefinitely. Secrets have a way of emerging, and the higher the stakes, the more explosive the consequences. The sudden disappearance was not merely a logistical or scheduling issue. It was a symbolic rupture, a signal that the equilibrium of trust and duty had been disrupted. and that the coming days would demand difficult choices, emotional endurance, and strategic foresight. In retrospect, the sudden disappearance marked the first visible fracture in the polished narrative of royal life. It introduced uncertainty, speculation, and tension that would ultimately lead to revelations, confrontations, and emotional upheaval. What began as subtle deviations and unexplained absences set the stage for a series of events that would challenge loyalties, expose hidden desires, and place the royal family under intense scrutiny. The calm had ended, the storm was gathering, and the world would soon witness a drama that had been quietly building behind